Hello, and welcome to my presentation on the relationship between soccer and science. And I'm Laura Caminezza. This is TSL Wellspring 2025. Soccer or football? What does each word mean? And where do they come from? In the United States and Canada, it's called soccer. Most other countries call it football. And why? Well, the history of the original sport began in around 150 years ago in England. And there were three different colleges that were playing this style of sport, but they had different rules and different methods of playing, and they called it different things. So they started to play each other and finally realized that they had to come up with a um, series of rules and of events. So let me see. Yes, you can see a little bit of the presentation here. The screen's not too good, sorry. But anyway, so they started off in England and they began to form one word for it and one set of rules. And originally it just became known as the association, and then they shortened it to association, and then they developed it into the word soccer. And why does that matter? Well, it shows the history as the words evolved and the names evolved, the sport evolved, and the names became what is also known in literacy as cognates, and that is the two words have a common or similar meaning in two or more languages that come from a shared root or the original word. And at this time in England, while English you would think is a predominant language, there were so many different dialects that in today's world they would be called different languages. And you've just kind of heard the abbreviated history of the term football/soccer. But the history of a word or the root of the word is called the etymology of the word. And as you go on and learn more about literacy and English, you'll see that the study of the origin or the beginning of the words have, as they evolve, it comes from, it relates to the history of the area they come from. And different countries, have different histories, and the words and the languages evolve from those. Two of the oldest languages are Greek and Latin, and and then Spanish, and those all kind of evolved, and they still represent a great deal of the history of those areas. Okay, today we're going to listen to the story of the basic scientific principles that form the game of soccer, and then we'll discuss and evaluate how these principles impact the game. Then we will describe and discuss examples of how they work and how they impact the game. We'll be discussing these words as vocabulary for this particular lesson. They are friction, gravity, soccer balls, and I'll explain that later. The Magnus effect, Sir Isaac Newton, the air resistance, kicking force, drag, and lift. We will pronounce these as time goes on so that we can practice so that we say it correctly. In team sports, in 1900, soccer became the first team sport in the Olympics. And it just illustrates the basic scientific theory that object in motion or an object at rest, for instance, a soccer ball that's just sitting on the grass, and then an object in motion, such as a soccer ball that is flying through the air, that they stay in motion or at rest until another force intervenes and either starts the object into motion or stops it. And for example, that could be grass that applies friction to the ball to keep it from stop rolling, or a goalie who stops the ball from going into the net. And of course, gravity can also stop a ball from moving. What does friction mean to you? Basically, it means that there are two forces usually applying pressure in opposite directions. When the forces are equal, well, then the object stays in one place. But when there is more force applied on one side than the other, then the object will react to the side or the force that is applying the greatest pressure. What does gravity mean to you? The definitions in this section: friction is a force generated. Well, gravity means that a force causes objects to move toward the Earth's center. So for anything that is above ground is going to, if it's moved and suspended, it's going to eventually fall back down to Earth. Friction is a force generated when objects slide past each other. The force also keeps motionless objects from sliding past each other. Gravity, again, is a force that causes objects to move toward the Earth's center. And then Sir Isaac Newton, and we're going to mention him just because he was the English physicist and mathematician who was the father of physics. And his works in mathematics are some of the most important in the history of modern science. He is one of the greatest scientists ever. And just to let you know, if you haven't heard of him, he was alive back in the 1600s, which is roughly almost 400, 500 years ago. And he developed all of these theories by observation. He just watched and observed and figured out what was making things move. He did all of this, mind you, did not have computers, did not have cameras. He just observed. So part of your education is observing things and just trying to take them in and figure them out. But all of his principles are still relevant today. In this slide, we see the force of friction from the foot going to the right, and that is launching the ball into space. And then then you have air resistance that was applying pressure to keep back. Then you have, that's called applying here, the kicking force. And the thing with soccer balls is that they are only weigh about a pound. And so the kicking force of a typical soccer player is, it only takes that force to be applied in 1/100th of a second. But that's when the foot meets the ball and launches it into the air. So that is the friction when the ball drops, and then his foot friction hits it up. This is air resistance, and that keeps the ball from moving. And then you have your gravity. Let me know if you would like me to go back to that slide or any of these slides so you can look at all of the different descriptions. For vocabulary, we have air resistance, again, gravity, kicking force, friction, and the Magnus effect. Can you say air resistance? Let's say air resistance. How about gravity? Let's say gravity. Let's say kicking force. Then we'll say kicking force, and then friction, and then Magnus effect. But it is amazing how these forces impact the game of soccer and other games. So again, here's how air resistance holds the ball down, and the applied force, which is the kicking foot, which would be right about here, would take and kick the ball up. Gravitational force would hold it down to the earth. Over here in this picture, this little girl in the red raincoat, her umbrella is being pulled up by air resistance coming up, or was being held there by resistance, and then the air is pulling it up and applying resistance through the wind. And then, of course, the gravity is holding her down to earth. Okay, gravity in soccer, gravity is a force that pulls the ball toward the ground. Gravity affects the ball's trajectory and ensures that it returns to the ground after being kicked. And of course, here it's being kicked and it's bouncing back up because it hit with enough force that it could withstand gravity for a short period of time. Gravity is always exerted towards the ground, even when the ball is in the air. This photo to the right shows what happens when the ball bounces but is returning to the turf and is also bouncing in water, which is also a resistance. Friction is when the ball falls to the ground. Friction against the grass makes the ball slow down. Does anybody have any questions about what friction means? Okay. Then this is the kicking force, and this is a picture of the player kicking the ball. And as you see, if he kicks it just right, it extends up and curves up and then starts coming back to earth as the gravity becomes more forceful with the and the air resistance. Both are applying force against the ball to bring it back down. And this is a good picture of the Magnus effect. And that is a form of the lift force that acts on a ball that spins through the air. The Magnus effect makes a spinning ball curve as in flight after it's kicked on the left. So this is the ball, but it's starting to curve up and go in. And I'm sure all of you who've ever watched a soccer game have seen that happen. Some people just assume it's the result of how the player applied force against the ball. Excuse me. And there might be some truth to that, but it's a lot of it is just the effect of the spinning of the ball itself. This is a example of the different types of soccer balls and how their manufacturing and technology have changed over the years. And in particular, I'll point this one out because it has little spikes on it, sort of like a basketball. And what that does, it makes it spin faster in the air. And then this one had, I believe this one, it did have a bladder, which is inside the soccer ball, that is a heavier form of plastic per se, and it holds the air inside the soccer ball. It makes it tighter and more firm, and that gives the ball more lift. Again, the vocabulary that we're looking here is drag and lift. And this is another picture of what drag can be. And in this case, it's the form of air resistance and air molecules. And in the molecules here is the raindrops and the moisture. And you can see it's pretty heavy right here. It's raining a bit, and this is a lot of either fog or steam that is coming up. And this is typically, though, it resists this solid object, which of course is the soccer ball. This is an example also impacts other outdoor sports, such as American football and baseball. And these can have a dramatic effect on the outcome of the shot or the game. And here's again an example of lift, and it affects air motion. And it can also make, at this point, one side of the ball has more force, air force, than the other. And it makes the ball curve, and it makes the ball shift around and bounce while it's in the air. And this shows the lift and the curve. Again, this theory was described by Sir Isaac Newton. That goes back hundreds of years, guys. Some things don't change. Okay, these are references and these are the sources from which I got the information for this presentation. Now, I'm going to be handing out to you this handout that describes some of the forces applied on the ball, soccer ball. And this is sort of a normal force if it's going straight up, but still you have gravity pulling it down. And then here are two arrows that I would like for you to write down the type of forces that are being applied against the ball from each direction. And if you have questions, just raise your hand and I'll come talk to you about it. And then I also am going to go back and give you handouts of the slides where the soccer balls were, and then the soccer player kicking the ball, because that had a lot of information that you can read on your own and write about if you would like and turn in. It is very interesting, and I think you would enjoy reading it. So thank you for your attention, and have a nice day.